On the day in their 19th birthday party on a motherfucking boat, Minami Kotaro and his foster brother Nobuhiko are kidnapped by an evil cult known as the Church of Scientology. Oops, read that wrong. I meant Gorgum. To be surgically enhanced to OT7 super beings to become the next leader of this evil cult and in turn rule the world. Okay, just kidding on the OT7 part. But before the brainwashing phase can be completed, Kotaro escapes from their evil clutches and uses his new abilities to become Kamen Rider Black to stop their evil threat and protect the innocent. As for this being my first review of a Kamen Rider series, and my only exposure so far outside the infamous Saban Smashed Rider series, I will admit that I am actually pretty nervous. Yeah, I'm nervous right now to review this series. Whoa. But yes, moving on. I am aware that there is, of course, a small but hardcore international fan base of this franchise, and I did not consult with any fans with how to go about with my review. I'm sorry if this is going to offend anyone, but of course, I'll just do it my way like I always do, and, any fan who watches this, feel free to give your input. Any constructive input, and any newbie who watches this, I hope you check out Kamen Rider Black because of this review. And if you want to see it, look up Century Kings, or you can go to tokuzilla.me or krdl.info for this series. But moving on. I really enjoyed this series and thought Kotaro was a very idealistic person by Japanese standards. Kotaro is always someone who is willing to stop whatever he is doing to help somebody. He's just doing his own thing, and he sees kids fighting, and he's willing to butt in and fix things, make things right. He's a very responsible person. In a way, he kind of reminds me of Bill Bixby's David Banner from the old Incredible Hulk TV series. And Kotaro is motivated by his love for his fellow man and wanting to save Nobuhiko from Gorgon. And, he's not like someone like Yuki Guy from Jetman, who he's given these powers and, he wants nothing to do with it, and he doesn't want to save the Earth. But, Kotaro was forced into this himself, but he's willing to do something right with the wrongs that were done upon him. And the funny thing is, I earlier mentioned that by Japanese standards, Kotaro is a very idealistic person. Yeah, allow me to explain on that. A couple of J-vloggers, Mexican Samurai 100 and Gimme a Flake Man, have made videos in relation to seeing a situation and, trying to help out. Normally, people in Japan don't behave that way. Mexican Samurai 100 once talked about when he first came to Japan 20 years ago, he saw a woman pushed out of a moving car in the middle of the street and nobody did anything about it. Cars were swerving not to hit her and nobody checked up on her. And Mexican Samurai 100 went to help her, and her boyfriend or husband or whoever got out of the car and started kicking her. And then Mexican Samurai 100 intervened and fought the guy, and Mexican Samurai 100 was brought to the Koban, or the police box. He was told that in Japan he shouldn't have done what he did and should have called the police. Thankfully, he was able to prove it was self-defense and no charges were pressed against him. And I sort of have a similar experience myself, but not to the severity of Mexican Samurai. It was around a year ago, around the time of this, around this time, I was listening to some music on my iPod. Then right next to me, let's just say like 3 feet across from me, I hear an old guy and a younger woman yelling at each other at the top of their lungs, and it freaks me out, and I just naturally look at them. And the old guy turns to me, gets up in my face, and yells at me, calling me like a stupid gaijin and all that shit for no reason, and all that stuff. If he were 50 years younger, 65% chance I would have right or kicked his ass, and 35% chance I would have just taken him down and armbarred him Hickson Gracie style. But, since he was old and I didn't want to deal with an ignorant racist asshole, I just walked off, not wanting anything to do with him anymore. He was old and he couldn't keep up with me with how fast I was walking. And also, one last thing, on the news, I hear people, people in like apartment buildings are hearing domestic disputes, people are hearing yelling, and nobody does anything about it. They're aware of it, but they don't want to get involved, and it's just like, to them it's too much mendokusai, meaning it's troublesome. And it's just sad to see that nobody does what Kotaro does in real life, which is what really surprises me. And this is why I like Kotaro so much. Even though Kotaro has to fight monsters, he has a very positive attitude and outlook. He's a very good representation of the old school style of Giri Ninjo, meaning duty and obligation, which is kind of sad. You don't really see that in today's Japan except for what happened after March 11th. But, that I've been talking about that too long. Back to the review. Gorgom as villains are pretty much what you expect out of any crazy-ass cult. They think mankind is evil and is corrupting the earth, polluting the earth, and they just want to get rid of humans so they can repurify the earth. And of course they're crazy, manipulative, and have high influences within the Earth's elite. They always have crazy schemes to get people to obey their will and all that stuff. Even as crazy to the levels of even at Niaj. If you don't know what that phrase means, it's like one of those meaningless phrases like rabba-labba-ding-dong or give peace a chance. But viewers familiar with the series know what I'm talking about. The villains toward the end do get very extreme with how they attack civilians. But anyway, I felt one of its flaws was that Birugenia, one of the side villains, could have been used slightly a bit more, and I thought there was more room for him to develop. But other than that, from the High Priest to Shadow Moon, the villains were pretty sick. I felt the story of a man who loves humanity versus a cult who wants to destroy it was done effectively well with this series, and for that, I give the story and characters a 9.5 out of 10. The action is very intense. It is mostly reliant on technical martial arts choreography and, it's just done very well. The range is very precise with how they want to throw the punches and kicks, and, even when jumping. Even though I have very limited familiarity with Kamen Rider, the character's iconic rider kick is used very well in this series. And each monster or mutant are all based on animals, as opposed to, let's say, inanimate objects, and the costumes are more organically detailed in comparison to the monsters in Super Sentai. The monsters, feel like a classic horror movie, and it does try to have that same kind of atmosphere. The monsters have abilities that bring their own threat to the people of Tokyo and to the writer himself. The special effects are of course outdated, but bring a certain kind of element that goes well with the rhythm of the action, though not, let's say, as bad as, let's say, how Bioman was. But the threat of the monsters are very well present when going all apeshit on the civilians. Outside of costume, Kotaro is a very formidable fighter. When he fights possessed civilians or human beings, he does not try to punch them or anything. As opposed to trying to defeat them, he will look to restrain them, and the choreography in that regard is excellently done well. So I leave the action at a perfect 10 out of 10. The music for someone my age is a little hard to describe. It has this classic feel of Japanese masculinity during that time period, and Kurata Tetsuo, the actor of Kotaro, actually sings the song himself. He has this very heroic, manly, and charismatic voice. The insert songs are all very distinct, whether lyrically or instrumentally present, and they're just all splendid and perfectly mix the dark and hopeful atmosphere of the show. For that, I give the music another perfect 10 out of 10. And to conclude, as for my first Kamen Rider series, Black just really impresses me like no other TV show has ever done. This was a franchise I should have been meaning to watch for almost 20 years, and I regret not watching it sooner, but I'm thankful to have lived and watched this series, as weird as this sounds. But if you want to watch this series, go to either krdl.info or tokozilla.me. Even though Sentai may not have the highest standards of acting, or tokusatsu as a whole, Kamen Rider Black has a better distinction. Like there is one episode where a girl's possessed by a monster and has super strength. I thought she did a great job with her acting. Many of the child actors do a good job. Kurata Tetsuo is also a great actor himself. He perfectly pulls off Kotaro of being a badass, but this really nice guy at the same time. I say if you want something with action, with a classic monster movie feel, but with a human drama like the old Incredible Hulk, I strongly recommend this series, which I give an overall score of a 9.75 out of 10. And yes, and look forward to my next review in a few weeks, which will be the sequel, Kamen Rider Black RX, which was also used to be the inspiration of the infamous Saban Smash Rider. So yeah, thank you for listening to my first ever review of a Kamen Rider series.